Welcome to the deep dive. Imagine boosting your team's productivity by maybe two, maybe even three times, driving incredible innovation and keeping your best talent, all without spending a dime.
Yeah.
It sounds like corporate fantasy, right? But the sources you've shared with us make a really bold claim. Many organizations are already sitting on this massive potential, and the secret ingredient to unlock it doesn't cost a cent.
That's absolutely right. And what's fascinating here, I think, is that we're not talking about, throwing money at the latest tech gadgets or expensive consulting.
Right.
The business case we're going to unpack is for elements often dismissed as merely soft skills or touchy-feely in the workplace.
Yeah, those things people sometimes roll their eyes at.
Exactly. But the data, the research from your sources, it shows these human elements have concrete, measurable impacts on performance, innovation, and employee retention.
Absolutely. So our mission in this deep dive is to take the stack of sources you've given us and really extract the most crucial insights, showing exactly how you can achieve these dramatic no-cost performance boosts.
Okay.
And to do that, I think we need to start by looking at the flip side. What's the real, tangible cost of allowing toxicity to fester in the workplace?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, one of the most frequent complaints from leadership is about employee disengagement. You hear things like,
Oh, yeah.
people are just here for a paycheck, or they lack inspiration, they're not creative,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
And is that really true or just perception?
It seems to be a real phenomenon. Sadly, reports from major organizations like Gallup confirm this isn't just, a feeling leaders have.
Yeah.
It's a widespread reality.
And this disengagement isn't just a morale issue, it's hitting companies hard in the wallet, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Your sources cite estimates that disengaged employees cost U.S. companies a staggering $450 to $550 billion annually.
Billion. With a B.
Billion.
Yeah.
Annually. In lost productivity. Think about that number for a second.
Sure.
Maybe $500 billion gone every year.
Wow.
It's a massive drag on the economy and individual businesses. But the potential upside is equally compelling. Implementing programs focused on engagement in even a mid-sized company. That could yield upwards of, say, $2 million in productivity and efficiency improvements.
Just from engagement.
Just from engagement.
Yeah.
With literally no increase in budget. The return on human investment is huge.
That's a powerful contrast. Beyond just like disinterest, what happens when the environment is actively negative, maybe even fear-based? How does that impact performance?
Yeah, this raises an important question about the human brain. Your sources delve into the neuroscience here.
Okay.
When employees are operating under fear or stress, their cognitive function, their ability to think clearly and solve problems, it drops significantly.
How significantly?
The research points to about a 37% reduction in cognitive function.
Wait, 37%. So fear isn't just unpleasant, it literally makes people less capable at their job.
Precisely. When you're under threat, your brain prioritizes survival. Energy is diverted to the primal parts of the brain, like the amygdala.
Fight or flight.
Exactly, fight or flight response. That energy is being taken away from the prefrontal cortex. That's the part responsible for complex problem solving, creativity, critical thinking.
Ah, I see.
So yes, survival becomes the priority, not solving intricate business problems or innovating. Your brain is in survival mode, not high performance mode.
And that links directly to something we hear a lot about now, psychological safety. What role does that play?
Psychological safety is absolutely critical. It's fundamental.
Define that quickly for us.
It's the feeling that you can speak up, share an idea, maybe ask a question, or even admit a mistake without fear of being, punished, shamed, or marginalized. Google's famous Project Aristotle study, which is highlighted in your sources, identified psychological safety as the #1 predictor for high-performing teams.
Number one. Above everything else.
#1. And teams that lack it, they're 50% less likely to generate new ideas.
Half the idea's gone just because people are afraid to speak up.
Exactly. If people are silent because they're afraid, innovation just grinds to a halt.
That makes total sense. If you're scared to speak, you definitely won't share that slightly crazy idea that might actually be the next big thing.
Exactly right. And another immense cost tied to these toxic environments is high employee turnover. People simply leave.
And replacing employees is incredibly expensive, isn't it? It's not just the salary costs.
Oh, not at all. Replacing an employee can cost up to 150% of their annual salary, sometimes more.
150%.
Wow. Yeah. That includes the cost of recruitment, onboarding, training the new person, and crucially, the loss of their institutional knowledge, their relationship.
All that experience walking out the door.
Precisely. Your sources showed tremendous turnover occurring in environments marked by fear and low trust. Consider the example. There's one from a financial services firm in your sources.
Okay.
They reduced turnover by 35% and saved millions. Millions.
Yeah.
Simply by implementing empathy-based leadership training.
Millions from empathy. That feels like such a direct counterpoint to that old school tough manager idea.
It really does. And the data backs it up. Let's also look at employee health. Stress and fear aren't just abstract concepts. They manifest physically and mentally.
Right. It takes a toll.
It does. Employees in high-stress environments experience 50% higher healthcare-related issues and costs.
50% higher.
50%. And absenteeism also jumps by about 26%. So the toxicity literally shows up on the company's healthcare line item and in lost workdays.
Okay, what about accountability? That's a classic complaint, right? My team isn't accountable or they lack passion. How does toxicity relate to that?
Well, what's fascinating here is that what leaders often label as a lack of accountability or passion is actually, well, it's a perfectly rational response to a command and control environment.
How so?
When survival means just following orders to avoid blame, people naturally do the minimum required. Your sources point out that strict policies often increase blame avoidance, errors, and turnover rather than boosting true accountability.
That feels completely backward from traditional management thinking. You'd think more rules means more control and thus more accountability.
It feels that way, maybe intuitively, but the research contradicts it. Your sources include a powerful anecdote. I think it was about a worker who was told, quite literally, you get paid to do, not to think.
Oof.
Yeah. Despite having reservations about the task, they did exactly what they were told, which led to a bad outcome.
And when asked why?
When asked why, knowing it was wrong, they simply said, because I was told to. Their priority was surviving the immediate pressure, not critical thinking or achieving the best outcome for the company.
Wow. Just doing what it takes to get through the moment, even if it's wrong.
Exactly. And the sources highlight the boss, boss, boss phenomenon as a kind of telltale sign of this culture.
What do you mean by boss, boss, boss?
When employees constantly refer to their supervisor only as my boss, never by name, it often signals a fear-based power dynamic. People aren't thinking like owners or contributors. They're just doing the bare minimum to stay in line. You see stagnation, not growth, in that kind of environment.
So you're saying all these issues, the disengagement, the fear, lack of safety, high turnover, health costs, even this perceived lack of accountability, they're all symptoms. Symptoms of a toxic workplace environment.
Precisely. The sources describe this collective burden as the productivity tax of workplace toxicity. It's arguably the most expensive line item a company has, but you won't find it explicitly listed on the balance sheet.
Hidden cost.
The massive hidden cost. It costs organizations an immense amount. But here's the critical insight, the hopeful part. Fixing it costs nothing in terms of budget.
Okay, that brings us to the solution then. If toxicity is the disease and its cost is so incredibly high, what does the healthy, high-performing environment look like? And where's the evidence it actually works?
Right, the evidence. It's overwhelming, actually. Your sources show tremendous performance gains in environments built on high trust and psychological safety.
Like what kind of gains?
Well, Paul Zach's research, featured in HBR and referenced in your material, found that high-trust workplaces have, get this, 76% higher engagement.
76%.
76 plus 50% lower turnover and 2.5 times higher productivity compared to low-trust environments.
2.5 times higher productivity just from trust. That number is, it's almost hard to grasp.
It is staggering. And the brain science backs this up even further. Remember those MRI studies we mentioned?
Yeah.
They show that in a psychologically safe environment, brain activity literally shifts away from the survival-focused amygdala towards the prefrontal cortex.
So it's not just about feelings.
Not at all. The science shows that creating a safe workplace literally rewires your brain on the job, shifting energy towards the parts responsible for innovation and complex problem solving. This measurably boosts things like pattern recognition, learning speed, and decision-making accuracy by over 30%.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. So building trust and safety doesn't just make people feel better. It literally makes them smarter and more capable at work.
The science is incredibly clear on this. Environments of trust and safety lead directly to higher quality work, deeper engagement, and greater work satisfaction.
And that satisfaction probably feeds back into better work, right?
Absolutely. It creates a positive feedback loop, driving even better work. It's actually costing companies money not to create these kinds of environments.
You mentioned untapped potential earlier. Does this kind of environment unleash things like self-organization or intrinsic motivation where people want to do good work?
Oh, absolutely. These qualities flourish naturally when people feel safe, trusted, and valued. Your sources share an anecdote from a CEO
Mm-hmm.
who said they never had to ask key members to work extra hours during critical situations. They recalled a specific instance where a team member voluntarily stayed late, canceled a personal plan voluntarily, because they felt pride, engagement, caring, and accountability for their work. They wanted the project to succeed, not because they were forced, but because they felt a genuine connection and ownership.
That speaks volumes about the difference in motivation, doesn't it? What about leadership style? You mentioned
Oh.
empathy earlier. Does empathy actually have a bottom line impact?
Yeah, it definitely does. Your sources point to, for instance, software development companies that transition to empathy-first management approaches.
And the results.
Significant results, like 40% higher productivity.
Yeah.
And in one case mentioned, a 5 times increase in stock price.
5 times. Wow.
Yeah, and customer satisfaction also saw increases, maybe 30 to 40%. This approach creates tangible business value. It's not just fluff.
I'm reminded of that Simon Sinek story about Noah the barista, which I think is also in the sources.
Oh, that's a perfect illustration, yes. Simon Sinek describes Noah loving his job because his manager saw him, acknowledged him, asked how he was doing, if he needed anything.
Mhm.
Just basic human connection.
Simple things.
Really simple things. That connection made him feel valued and safe to be himself, which made him want to do his best work. Contrast that with the same person working in a different hotel where the relationship was purely transactional,
And he just did the minimum.
did the bare minimum.
Mm.
Leadership doesn't need a budget to create an environment where people want to give their best. It just requires treating people with empathy and respect.
But there's this old, deeply ingrained belief, isn't there, that leaders have to be tough, maybe even a bit intimidating, that showing empathy is somehow a sign of weakness.
Ugh, that belief. It's such a relic from a very different era, you know. Many people might default to that tough persona because they think it's what a leader should be. It's expected.
Right.
But just think about your own experience when you've been yelled at or intimidated. Did you feel inspired, creative, energized to go the extra mile?
No, definitely not. More like shut down.
Exactly. The evidence shows empathy is a strength. It leads to higher retention, better teamwork, continuous innovation. These are not just nice-to-haves. They provide compounding returns that directly benefit the business over time.
And speaking of compounding returns and innovation, AI is obviously a massive topic right now. Does this environment of trust and safety impact how companies adopt and use new tools like artificial intelligence?
Yes, this raises an important question, and the research here is quite striking. Your sources cite an MIT Sloan study showing that AI adoption rates triple in psychologically safe environments.
Triple. Why such a huge difference?
It seems to be because when employees feel safe, they approach new tools like AI with curiosity rather than fear.
Oh,
They think, how can I use this to do my job better or be more creative? Instead of worrying, is this tool going to replace me?
So it's curiosity versus compliance or fear.
Exactly. Adopting tools out of curiosity is very different from adopting them out of compliance or apprehension.
So addressing the human fear element first actually unlocks the potential of the technology itself.
Precisely. Framing AI tools as augmentations, ways to increase creativity, deliver higher quality work, handle more complex tasks that removes the fear that inhibits experimentation and real innovation.
Makes sense.
Companies with high psychological safety see AI adoption that's reportedly 40% faster and experience fewer implementation failures.
Fewer failures.
Fewer failures, exactly.
Yeah.
Because their employees are engaged, curious, and willing to explore how to leverage these tools rather than subtly or even intentionally resisting them out of fear.
Okay, we've painted a really clear picture of the problem's immense cost and the solution's powerful benefits. But if it costs nothing in terms of budget, what does implementing this actually look like day to day?
Yeah.
And how do you even measure progress?
Right, the practical side. Your sources touch on measurement, acknowledging that it can be tricky sometimes. You can look at things like Net Promoter Scores, NPS, though they caution these can sometimes be watermelon report.
Watermelon report.
Yeah, looking green and good on the surface metrics, but actually red and bad underneath if the underlying culture is still toxic.
Got it. Green outside, red inside.
Exactly. Psychological safety surveys are a more direct measure, obviously. And of course, turnover rates are a pretty clear indicator.
What about linking it more to business outcomes? Is there a metric for that?
Perhaps looking at the correlation between customer satisfaction and company revenue after you've made deliberate efforts to improve the internal environment.
Oh, okay.
As you build a safer, more engaged workplace, you often see better customer feedback and increased revenue moving in tandem. It shows the external result of that internal change.
That connection makes perfect sense. Happy employees often lead to happy customers,
Yep,
right?
that's the idea.
So what are some concrete, practical, no-cost actions leaders can take starting, like, tomorrow?
Okay, practical steps. One absolutely fundamental practice is active listening. It sounds so simple.
But it's hard.
It can be hard. But leaders who genuinely listen build incredible trust. Your sources mention studies showing active listening can avoid misunderstandings by as much as 60%.
60% fewer misunderstandings just from listening better.
Yeah, it dramatically reduces friction and wasted effort. Think about how much time gets wasted clarifying things that weren't heard properly the first time.
A lot.
A lot. Active listening helps ensure everyone is truly in sync, preventing mistakes.
Okay, active listening. What else?
Another incredibly simple, no-cost activity is incorporating high-trust check-ins.
High-trust check-ins.
Yeah, these are just brief conversations, maybe 5–10 minutes. Your sources indicate they can boost participation and engagement by 20–30%.
What makes them high-trust?
The key is that they don't have to be purely transactional work updates.
Yeah.
Casual, even personal chats. How was your weekend? How are things going? They reinforce the human connection, building the trust that forms the bedrock for everything else.
So taking a few minutes to connect as people, not just colleagues.
Exactly. Building those personal connections seems to be a running theme here.
It does. What else can leaders do?
Open decision-making transparency is crucial. Leaders should explain the why behind decisions.
The why, not just the what.
Precisely. When people understand the rationale, even if they don't fully agree, it significantly increases their engagement and initiative to make the decision succeed because they aren't operating in a vacuum or constantly second-guessing motives.
And that must cut down on a lot of wasted energy and office politics.
Oh, absolutely. When people don't know the why, human nature dictates they fill that information void, often with worst-case scenarios or speculation.
Yeah, the rumor mill.
Exactly. That wastes tremendous time and breeds distrust in political maneuvering. Being open about the reasoning prevents all of that. Transparency is critical and, honestly, incredibly helpful.
Okay, let's quickly recap what we've explored in this deep dive. It feels like a lot, but the core message seems clear.
Yeah, I think so. We've seen that workplace toxicity is far more than just unpleasant. It's a massive, often hidden cost on a company's balance sheet.
Right, lost productivity, high turnover, healthcare costs, stifled innovation.
All of that. But the really good news is that by focusing on fostering psychological safety, high trust, and empathy elements that cost nothing financially, organizations can unlock immense potential.
Leading to dramatically higher engagement, increased productivity by factors of 2 or 3.
Better retention, improved customer satisfaction, and even faster adoption of critical new technologies like AI. It's a whole package of benefit.
And the truly remarkable insight, I think, is that these powerful benefits come from focusing on the human element, on how people feel, how they're treated, and the environment leaders create. It doesn't require a line item in the budget. It requires a fundamental shift in how leadership is practiced day to day.
And what's fascinating here is how consistently the evidence aligns. You know, from the neuroscience of the brain to the real-world business results of companies that prioritize these human-centric approaches.
Yeah.
It truly seems to cost organizations vastly more not to do this.
So a question for you listening. Think for a moment about the environment where you have felt most productive, most engaged, and most willing to give your best. What was it about that place or team that made you feel that way? Chances are it had elements of what we've discussed.
And this raises an important question, maybe the final one for everyone listening. If creating a psychologically safe and empathic environment costs nothing financially, yet delivers such profound and compounding benefits for both people and the business, why isn't it the absolute default way leaders operate everywhere?
Something worth pondering indeed.
Definitely.
That is a provocative thought to leave you with. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into unlocking immense workplace potential without the price tag. We really appreciate you sharing the source material that made this exploration possible.
It's been a genuine pleasure exploring these insights with you.
And for everyone listening, you can find links to explore the source videos mentioned in this deep dive right in the description below. That includes more information about implementing practical steps like active listening and creating those valuable high-trust check-ins.
Yeah, definitely check those out.
We encourage you to reflect on the concepts we discussed and perhaps identify just one no-cost practice you could implement or advocate for starting tomorrow. Until next time.